Radio Cairo English Service presents
Special Program COP27 Egypt 2022.
Prepared by Mohamed Abd Kamel, presented by Jeff Payton. Dear listeners of the English International Service from Radio Cairo of Egypt, welcome to this special program. Today we have a great pleasure to present this interview with His Excellency, Mr. Adao Barbosa, the representative of Timor-Leste of the Climatic Affairs of the United Nations, in which he is talking about his participation in the event which is hosted by Egypt in the touristic of Sharm el-Sheikh between 6 and 18 of actual November. Now we will listen to Mr. Adao Barbosa, the representative of Timor-Leste of the Climatic Affairs in the United Nations.
Good morning, colleagues. This is Adao Barbosa from Timor-Leste. I am a special envoy and ambassador for climate change from Timor-Leste. And in terms of Timor-Leste's contribution to the international environmental degradation issues, we, in fact, every year we celebrate our Independence Day on 20 May, and we always addressed issue of environmental quality, since our national constitution requires us to protect and to conserve our environmental quality and avoiding environmental degradation from the impact of human activities, including climate change itself. In this regard, we have a commitment to ratify UN Convention on Climate Change, UN Convention on Biological Diversity, as well as UN Convention on Land Degradation issues back in 2006. Those three Rio Conventions came into the force in Timor-Leste since 2007. And then since 2007, we have already involved very much in climate change negotiations to at least reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from all parties, but more specifically from the developed country parties, to safeguard our world. In Paris, at COP21, Timor-Leste was very much speaking on behalf of the LDCs on the issue of loss and damage. Since then, all parties in Paris integrated loss and damage issues into new agreement that is a Paris Agreement itself. As we can see, Article 8 of the Paris Agreement is one of our fight that we try to integrate these loss and damage issues into the new agreement in Paris back to 2015. Since 2009, Timor-Leste delegate have already involved in climate change negotiation issues. Especially myself have been speaking on behalf of the LDCs, least developed countries, on the issue of loss and damage. And at last COP in Glasgow, Timor-Leste was one of them parties to request loss and damage further activities, especially catalyzing or providing technical assistance on catalyzing loss and damage issues into all developing countries, especially the LDCs, or least developed countries. In this sense, parties in Glasgow come up with one more further ideas on enhancing loss and damage issues, especially establishing a new point on loss and damage on the Santiago network that was decided in Madrid. So in Glasgow, it was more elaborating how to operationalize Santiago network issue into real action that will be helping all developing countries, but more specifically for the least developed countries and small and developing states in the world. Last subsidiary bodies meeting in Germany, Timor-Leste was once again putting these Santiago Network's operationalization issues forward to establish the structure that will be managing Santiago Network issues into appropriate actions that will be helping developing countries to deal with capacities issues for loss and damage. In Glasgow as well, parties decided to establish a dialogue on finance for loss and damage. In fact, Timor-Leste was speaking on behalf of 46 countries in the world who have been seen as the most vulnerable one in terms of economic capacity. We call it LDCs, least developed countries. And we requested all parties to come up with a new decision on financing for loss and damage. Since then, parties established a dialogue. We call it a Glasgow Dialogue for Financing for Loss and Damage. In fact, this is now becoming a urgent issues for all the 77 in China, all developing countries under the umbrella of the 77 in China, in terms of African group comprised of 55 countries, small island developing states, we call it IOSIS, comprised of 44 countries, as well as LDCs, 46 countries, and Latin American Caribbean countries. We are all together. We push to have a new decision on financing for loss and damage. So for the next COP27 in Egypt, all developing country parties, including the LDCs that is led by Timor-Leste, to come up with a clear decision on how to establish financial arrangement for loss and damage. As part of this 77 in China, Timor-Leste is supporting the new agenda item proposed by the 77 in China, Pakistan on behalf of the 77 in China, to have a financial arrangement for addressing loss and damage at COP27. In fact, this is now becoming one of the critical agenda for the COP27 NCMF3 in Egypt. In terms of our engagement from Timor-Leste, we have been planning in place to come up with appropriate adaptation measures under our national adaptation plan. In fact, Timor-Leste has already submitted its national adaptation plan to the Secretariat of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC Secretariat, last year, with different sectors adaptation actions, And in fact, we are negotiating with our partners and our government itself to provide financial support for implementing our adaptation priorities that we've already put as part of our national adaptation plan. But in fact, based on the previous Conference of Parties decision, all NAP priorities from developing world, including NAP from Timor-Leste, National Adaptation Plan from Timor-Leste, need to be fully supported by the Green Climate Fund and LDCF, Least Developed Countries Fund, as well as other financial mechanisms of the convention, such as Adaptation Fund under the Paris Agreement and under the Kyoto Protocol. We look forward to get more financial support from developed country parties into these financial mechanisms, so that all developing countries, including Timor-Leste, can really access to these financial resources for addressing our adaptation priorities that we have already put as part of our national adaptation plans. In terms of mitigation issues from Timor-Leste, in fact, we have already put in place our mitigation priorities in terms of reforestation issues and issue of promoting renewable energy technology for low carbon development path. In fact, as one of the developing countries, Timor-Leste has no emission reduction target within our nationally determined contributions. But in fact, we are fully engaged to come up with new plan on low carbon development path for Timor-Leste. In fact, for this sense, we have already put our new goal for this mitigation commitment under the revised nationally determined contributions that will be hopefully finalized by the end of this year. Renewable energy technology for this country is critically important, and this is a real thing that we are going to have for addressing low carbon development path for Timor-Leste. This low carbon development path will be one of the issues that can be addressing as, or can be seen as a mitigation measures for Timor-Leste to contribute to the international legally binding outcomes under the Paris Agreement or Paris Agreement itself. In terms of question on the green economy, we do see that reforestation is one of the issues that we could address, Timor-Leste could address under the green economy itself, as well as low carbon development path issues in addressing promoting of new technology, renewable energy technology for mitigation issues will be seen as one of the areas that will be considered as part of our approach to address green economy for our communities and our ecosystem in Timor-Leste. We are fully engaged to have forest conservation issues. In fact, this is not for carbon market issues, but in fact this is environmental integrity issues, and this is also part of our engagement to address low carbon development path that is also addressing issue of green economy for our communities and our ecosystems, as well as our contribution to global climate change issues in the world. In terms of our participation in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, we are still fully engaged to lead loss and damage issues on behalf of the least developed countries in the world. We reaffirm our position that loss and damage financing is critically important for all developing countries, but more importantly for the small island developing states and least developed countries. That is, Timor-Leste is part of them. For fully engagement for all parties to have a good environment for our negotiation in Sharm el-Sheikh, we do believe that organizing country like Egyptian government will be fully engaged to have an important role for securing this international event in Egypt in November. In this regard, we would like to see the role of the Cairo's radio to have very good coverage to stress out all the negotiation process at COP27, but more importantly, media coverage for addressing the issue of climate finance. Climate finance, of course, for adaptation, of course, for mitigation, and in fact, to cover financing for loss and damage. This is media's responsibility to cover these critical issues. So finance for addressing loss and damage will be one of the critical issues to be discussed, and it needs to be covered by review from Cairo. And we also would like to see the decision on the doubling of adaptation finance by 2025, and of course new quantified or new collective quantified goal that will be also part of the Cairo's el-Sheikh's decision that will be also critically to be captured under the news raised by Cairo's radio in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP27 in November. That's all points that we really need to have at COP27, and with those words, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to His Excellency, Mr. Adao Barbosa, the representative of the Timor-Leste for the Climatic Affairs of the United Nations, for this prestigious interview, and welcome to Egypt and all of our guests. Thank you very much, all dear friends of this English International Service from Radio Cairo of Egypt. Best wishes for all. Mohamed Abd El Kamel, Jeff Payton.